Welcome to the Real Estate Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Gary Lipsky of Break of Day Capital. I talk to leading experts to discuss a wide range of subjects to educate investors on best-in-class practices to build legacy wealth and positively impact communities. Let's jump in. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Gary Lipsky with Break of Day Capital. Be sure to join our Facebook group, Asset Management Mastery, where we have a great community of thousands of like-minded individuals sharing resources and best practices. Hey everyone, we have launched the BODC Multifamily Impact Fund. Invest with a trusted operator with a track record of success. Our fund offers diversification, risk mitigation, tax benefits, and stringent acquisition criteria. If you'd like to learn more, head over to our website at breakofdaycapital.com.
Choosing the right insurance coverage for multifamily properties isn't that complicated if you know who to talk to. At the Garzella Group, we're uniquely qualified to help you navigate the range of policy choices you have, and we're committed to saving you 30% in the process. We do intensive market research and have nationwide relationships, so we can find coverage other insurance brokers simply can't. We should talk. Go to quotenow.biz and we'll start the conversation.
Today on the podcast, I'm going in a different direction. I have brought on a guest that I think can help you not only be a better investor, but also help you in life in general. I want to welcome my friend Aaron Velky to the show. Aaron is a transformational coach on a mission to help you solve your biggest problem, you. He has a podcast called Get Out of Your Own Way and has helped hundreds grow beyond their wildest dreams. Thanks for joining us, Aaron. Can you start by telling the listeners a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Ooh, happy to be here, Gary. My mission sort of there said very succinctly is to help entrepreneurs, especially those that have a big, crazy aspirational fire burning within them to get to the next level, find who they need to be to get there. You know, the journey that I've been on is one where every couple of years, the old Aaron has to die. And I think that through my hardship and through my challenge and through my victories, I've learned that the way that I think changes the way that I act, changes the results that I get. So now I get to walk people through the fire of change and help them get the life that they imagine is 5 or 6 years out in about 6 to 7 months.
I love that. There were some golden nuggets already. We're starting with definitely. You know, what got you here won't get you there, and so many people, good friends of mine, stay in that kind of like they're set, they're content, or that rut, and it'll just guide them for years. And what you said, I think, was super powerful.
I actually think that we get stuck mislabeling a groove for a rut, and we get really comfortable, right? We sit down and we're like, oh, you know, I don't know if it's worth the climb again. I think it's very easy when we look at something like investing where there's risk involved. If I just play it safe, that I won't have to navigate risk and failure and hardship. And ironically, the higher that we go, I find the more risk aversion we have because we feel like we'd go back to zero. And really the cost of that is the risk goes up, right? If you're not taking risk is high. So it's an interesting paradox when we think about what it looks like to play at the next level.
Yep. So what got you into this business? I mean, it's a pretty unique business.
I started as a youth soccer coach about 15, no, more than that. I was 22 years old, started coaching youth soccer. I was going through a lot of change. But I knew my favorite game was a great place to go earn a couple extra bucks. I fell in love with it. Like coaching young athletes was such a gift. I think I coached mostly girls, probably 3,500 different female athletes over the course of 12 years, published a book on it. But those athletes eventually taught me a very valuable lesson that if everyone is talented, well, what's going to be the difference? It's only going to be what's between your ears. And especially working with young females, the really special gift that I got is they were showing me where the gap was. They were teaching me that the things that were in the way were confidence, their ability to change when they were confronted with like, hey, are you prepared to make a commitment to get to the next level? That I'm afraid of it. So they were actually they were sort of my coaches to teach me about this. I was building a couple other businesses on the side, and not long into that, entrepreneurs started to say, "Hey, you look really happy. You look like you've already won the lottery and you just get to do what you love. How do you do that?" And I think my journey of building businesses, and some of them were wins, some were failures, has taught me that, to go back all the way to football, if you don't love the game you're in, you're playing the wrong game. So this has been an interesting sport. I went from coaching soccer to coaching business, but they are almost mirror examples of the same thing.
I love it. I love it. So what was the light bulb that made you realize, you were in your own way?
I need like a huge string of light bulbs for this. Well, I think here's what happens. If I look at my dream and the really, really big, scary one that I've got, that's like all the way up there, what I start to do is I start to tell myself stories about why I can't have it. Because of my history, because my parents didn't come from much, because, well, I'm not the smartest, or I'm not the most handsome, or I'm not the most, all these things, right? These stories. And I had a couple mentors that would sit me down and just ask me questions. And they would ask me questions in a way that forced me to look in the mirror and figure out what was really blocking me. And every single time it was me. The common denominator has always been, I know I'm in my own way when the excitement of what I'm pursuing is lower than the fear about what I'm doing. And once that fear climbs to a certain place, I freeze. I think we all freeze. I think what actually makes me effective is that I'm probably my best and worst student simultaneously. But when you commit to the process of getting out of your own way, what you really end up committing to is, I'm going to look in the mirror and recognize that I'm making this result of my own volition. And we love to blame everyone else. It's really easy to blame everyone else. The market, the money, the capital, the interest. And if you're serious about breaking through the next level, whether it's investing or running an Ironman, whatever you think is going to be accurate. It's going to be your truth.
It's so true. I remember the exact point of when I made the commitment to take my business to the next level. This was just before COVID hit. We're on a plane ride from Dallas. We were at a multifamily conference, and my business partner and I at the time were talking about writing a book. We had only done a couple of deals, starting a podcast on asset management because no one was talking about it, and launching a virtual summit. And I'm like, who are we to do these things? We've only done a few deals. Why, like imposter syndrome? And finally, we're just like, screw it, we're going to do it. And the mindset shift was, this is going to be a way, not necessarily to rocket through my business, but for me to educate myself and to be better at what I'm doing. Because if I'm doing these things, I better raise my game. And I mean, that was the rocket fuel for my business to really grow and step outside my comfort zone and really push myself,
Dude, I love that. I hear two major themes that I think we all deal with when we make those big commitments. Number one is you have no real idea what you're committing to, but you still have to commit. When you sign up for an Ironman, you might kind of have an idea of what you're committing to, but if you've never done it, it's going to be new. And there's sort of this illusion that I need to have steps 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 figured out. The way that you describe that, step 1 is I'm in. The second thing that stands out is that regardless of what the circumstances are, we are all looking for an excuse not to commit. And we find it. If you look for it, you'll find it. Well, the timing of this, like, I'm not really the guy. Maybe I don't have enough experience. You can find it if you look for it. And the way I hear you talk about that, being on that plane was simply where you made a new choice. I'm committed. And if you look at your relationship with the unknown and your ability to make a new choice, different from your pattern, those two things are almost a secret to making a big thing happen. This clearly has become a big thing, all from your relationship with the unknown and your willingness to make a new choice.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So transformational change is hard. I mean, most people aren't willing to put in the work, or quite honestly, um, are scared to do it. How do you get them to take that leap forward?
That's a great question. Knowing how hard it is, I think, is helpful because I understand, having been through this and having been through coaching. I'm a big believer that coaches should have coaches, trainers should have trainers. So my coach regularly puts me through the ringer too. So a bit of sympathy is required. But if there will come a point where you have one of two options. You can either surrender to the fact that you'll never get there, or you can rise to the change and transformation needed to get there. When someone is clear on their vision, their goal, I think clarity has a lot to do with making this process happen. But if they have clarity, I think most of us are willing to endure a certain level of discomfort. What ends up happening over time, though, is when our dream starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger, the discomfort has to get bigger and bigger. So here's the tactic that I use. Either you got two options. If you want to get there, you can either run really with all your energy and all your might and your heart to the thing that excites you the most. And in that, you're going to have to conquer some obstacles, and you're going to have to do that. The people that call me can see their vision, but they don't necessarily want to conquer those obstacles. So the alternative that I give them is, well, I will light your chair on fire if you don't start running. Meaning I'm going to make the pain of staying still much higher than the pain of moving. And when I think the reason we get stuck is comfort sets in. So pain is in the future. Oh, there's all kinds of discomfort to make that happen. Well, if I make your present really uncomfortable, you're going to say, well, it makes way more sense to go there. That's a rudimentary way, and in some ways like a very like crude way of saying what we do. But all of this is happening between the ears. All of the imagined pain is just between your earlobes and your temples, and all of your comfort is between your earlobes. So we mix match your wires, and we watch people in several months have a complete life transition. Their business, their money, their physical health, their experiences, their relationships, all of it changes.
Yeah, very, very cool. I like this phrase I've heard, and I use it with my daughters a lot when they see something that is just so, they think it's so daunting. And I ask them, how do you eat an elephant? And they
right.
always look at me weird. It's like one bite at a time. It's not, you don't have to do the 100 tasks. You have to do one task, and then you can do the next task, and then the next task,
Yeah.
one step at a time.
We're back at the unknown, right? I think when we imagine this stuff, we're like, well, what happens after that? And you won't know until you get there. Like starting a podcast, you don't even know what to ask when you first start. If you're first time buying real estate, you're not going to know what to ask. And our fear is often that, like, until I know all these answers, I'm not going to know it. And most of the time we get caught in this like information loop. I'm sure people listening have gotten stuck here. The hunt for information only leads to more questions, which leads to a hunt for more information. So eventually you just get stuck in this loop where you're assessing more than you are moving. And I know people that are still 10 years later, right where I left them, because they're still waiting for the information to give them permission. At a certain point, you just got to say, you know what, let's go. I'll figure it out on the way. And like any fun adventure, you don't have the whole story outlined already.
Yeah. And in the real estate world, I mean, we call it analysis by paralysis. We see so many people that, are, maybe have attended like 15 of our webinars, and we've had multiple discussions, but they're just over analyzing everything and not taking the leap. Like how do we get people to like take the leap and get out of their own way?
If you're stuck there, I would really sit down and think about these three questions. So the first is, can I handle an absolute failure? Because if you can contemplate your worst case scenario and tolerate it, you're ready. And I think we don't actually map it out. Like, I buy the property, I don't know, the foundation breaks and we got to put 60 grand in. Okay, good. Can you handle that? Are you prepared to handle that emotionally? The worst case scenario is so flippin' unlikely, but if you can map that out, great. Next step if you're going to spend the time to map out the worst case scenario, then do your due diligence, especially as an assessor, to write out the best case scenario. What's the best case scenario? We make $2,000 a month passively. Okay, great. We make $600 cash flow every single month. Awesome. So map out your worst, map out your best. Then I think a really important step is to figure out what skills are out of your comfort zone and what skills are already within it. So in managing a property, for example, you might need to get better at communication. You might need systems for managing paychecks and income, and you might need a budget tool. But if they're all new to you, then you know, all right, there's a bunch of skills here that are outside my comfort zone. I just think that with those three questions, you end up assessing better, because most of our assessment is like, how do I de-risk this? And you can't. It's impossible. There's risk. Every time I get in the car or on my motorcycle, there's risk. So if I'm trying to avoid risk, stay home, just hide in your cup and never come outside. The paralysis comes from indecision. And if you're able to look at best case, worst case, and comfort zone, what you're actually assessing is, how can I grow into this? And every investor that I've ever met, you and I are lucky enough to be around investors all the time. They've got their fair share of failure, but they also understand that motion and progress is way more exciting than the cost of waiting. And at some point, you're either going to jump or not. If you can't do it yourself, then hire help. Like, invest in help. Get somebody to hold you accountable. Get somebody to walk you through it. Do it with a partner. Do it with a friend. But I think the cost of stasis is way higher than people calculate.
Absolutely. I mean, our best lessons are our failures. And if in order to get to the top of the mountain, you need to fail a lot, but it's that frequency of failing and failing fast and figuring it out and moving forward is huge.
Man, I wish that it was possible to fail less. And at the end of the day, it's where you learn your best lessons. I also think, to connect it back to athletics, when we start to learn a sport, you're actually encouraged to get it wrong. Like, you want repetitions, right? And when we think of something like investing, we don't think of it like a sport, but it is one. You need repetitions. If I talk to someone that has done 50 deals, that person is going to be way better at deals than the person that's only done one, even if the one was a huge success. And when you start to take your mindset into like the sports dynamic and say, hey, okay, how do I practice this? Because investing is a practice. It's not a one and done. It's largely about, how many reps can I do? How can I get better at my reps? Now you really start to look at behavior a little bit differently.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk about one of your most successful transformation stories.
I had a guy that was 52 years old call me and say, hey, I don't really know where I'm at. I'm lost. And the program that I run is 6 months, and it takes a lot. There's investment on the line financially. There's investment of time. There's investment of energy. You got to be willing to look yourself in the mirror. And I don't mess around. If you want to play at this level, there's a demand that I ask, and there's a demand that I'm going to hold you to. In many ways, there wasn't a clear vision. So we worked on the vision. But once the vision was clear, all of the fears started coming to the surface. Everything that this guy was afraid of, all of the past relationships he'd had, all the past burns from business, all of those things. So we got face to face. I had him fly in, and we sat down and we looked at what the vision was compared to who he thought he was. And he couldn't see himself in that. He couldn't see that he was the person up there. And what we did is we tried to find where he didn't think he had enough skill and he didn't think he was valuable. So we started to dig a little bit. And in that moment, face to face, he mentions that his dad and he never really felt valuable by his dad. So without a whole long-winded story, we find this moment from when he was 9 years old, where his dad said, I'm going to take you fishing. His dad never showed up his dad showed up and said, I can't take you today. And him, in that moment at 9 years old, he had never left that moment, because in that moment, he rendered himself valueless. I'm not valuable. My dad doesn't even think I'm valuable enough to go on this trip. And in that moment, he parlayed that entire made up story of whether he was valuable into the same thing. I'm not valuable enough for this partnership. I'm not valuable enough for this investment. I'm not valuable enough for this this success. I'm just never going to get there. I'm not worthy of my dream. And we both sat and cried it out. I was role playing as his father in this moment, and he was reliving him at 9. And I think his whole world kind of shifted when we reframed it, because he understood now where the belief came from. And it was like breaking down a dam. Not only was there just like an emotional release, but I think there was this pressure that he had been trying to prove to somebody that didn't need proof that he was valuable, and also felt like he never would be. And I kid you not, in like 2 months, went from like 0 to 60 miles an hour, invested, bought, changed careers, left his job, like tripled his income, found friends, built a new circle, traveled to, I think, 3 different countries that were always on his list. Like, you'd have thought this guy just let go of everything that was ever holding him back. And it all came down to a belief from a 9-year-old version of him that didn't think he was worthy.
Wow. Powerful.
It was special.
Man. Very cool. I'm sure so many people have not necessarily that story, but a story, that could unleash them for tremendous joy or success,
I think we spend a lot of time running from, like, we don't run to our dream, we run from our fears. We're like, I don't want to end up broke. I don't want to be like my parents. I don't want to be like my friends. But life changes. And I think for investors, it's really important that we're not playing the game because we want to escape. We're running from something. We're actually building a really special life. So there's a very big difference in, like, I want to invest enough to quit my job versus I want to invest enough to go live this dream. And that's a very simple and subtle orientation shift. But that 2-degree shift changes the way that you orient when you go to make big choices.
Absolutely. I'm curious, who's had a tremendous influence in your life? Is there a Tony Robbins, a coach? Who's that person?
I've been to Tony Robbins events. They're amazing. Rock Thomas was a big coach of mine and teacher for a while. I've studied guys like Brian Weiss in more of a spiritual sense. I've spent a lot of time with fitness coaches and athletes. The earliest influence, I had a mentor, a friend, and in many ways, an early entrepreneur that showed me the ropes named Sean Rush, who really helped me understand what the heck I was getting myself into. And then probably lately, I had a therapist and a coach by the name of Aaron. So obviously cool. But he taught me somatics. He taught me really deep emotional work. He was teaching me psychology and neurology. And that guy really showed me what I could be. He modeled something in the way he got people up. Like, he got me up out of my chair to do these exercises. And I wanted to be more like him. I think it's easy to coach from behind a Zoom screen and say, like, hey, do this, do this, do this. But it's another to be like, fly to my house. We're going to spend 16 hours together, and I'm going to split your life apart, and we're going to put it back together here. And if it means we're shedding tears, cool. If it means we're standing on chairs and like growling at each other, cool. But I'm not going to shy away from any method to get you to where you want to go. Are you in? And I learned a lot of that from him.
That's awesome. Aaron, I love this conversation today. I know it's not our, on this podcast, it's not our typical real estate investing podcast, but I feel like it was super powerful for me. And I know it's going to be super powerful for our listeners. Where can listeners find out more about you and your company?
2 places to go that I think are easy. Go to Instagram, type my name, Aaron Velky, Aaron, V as in victory, ELKY. And then check out my website. Just go to aaronvelky.com. The Get Out of Your Own Way brand lives there. You can also visit getoutofyourownway.coach, but they're all kind of tied and tethered together. So check out aaronvelky.com. Follow on social. Like we talk about this a lot. We've got retreats that are coming up. We've got programs. If someone's like, hey, I'm in my own way, I know it, and I want to get to the next level, or isn't clear on what's next, they are certainly welcome to reach out. But I put out a lot of content. My podcast, which Gary probably got to get you on, is a great resource. And we put a lot of free resources out to help people.
Awesome. Well, this is Gary Lipsky signing off. I'll be back next week with another informative episode on the Real Estate Investor Podcast. To all of our listeners, thanks for joining us. And if you like this episode, please head over to iTunes or Stitcher and like, subscribe, and leave a review, as it will help us reach more people. And if you'd like to learn more about what we do at Break of Day Capital, head over to our website at breakofdaycapital.com and sign up for our newsletter and fill out our investor application. We'll talk to you next week.